This afternoon sits on the dais the General President of the Indian Science Congress, Dr. Chakraborty, who in my conversations with him was kind enough to say, "Madam, I will leave the statistics to you." Knowing you, and when you speak for women, you would like to recall numbers in the favor of your gender, and hence, at the onset, let me thank him for that kindness. On the dais is Professor Vijayalakshmi Saxena. She was kind enough to invite me for a session in 2021. Now, I don't know the scientific probability of me being around in 2021, but nonetheless, I accept her invitation with grace and gratitude. On the dais is Dr. Namita Gupta, Shri Professor P.P. Mathur, Professor Gangadhar, and your Chancellor, Shri Ashok Mittal, who had given me an opportunity to come to LPU a while ago to hoist the national flag. I am grateful that the Indian Science Congress has invited me back specially to address this session of the Women's Science Congress. Now, everybody knows that science is gender neutral. What is not neutral is the capacity of women to get scientific opportunities. So as Dr. Chakraborty says, let's look at the numbers. Before the numbers, let's look at what happened at the gate of LPU today when I came for this particular session. I was told to inaugurate a huge robotics prototype, given a scissor, and when I was introduced to the students who made that prototype of metal, they were all men. And I asked them, "Ladkiyan kahan hain?" And they said, "Madam, project ka naam hai Metal Magna." So that is the feminine part of our project. And when I inquired of the teacher looked at me, smiled and said, "Well, mechanical engineering mein hame zyada ladkiyan mili nahi." The fact that you clap, ladies and gentlemen, is where the challenge for women begins. That is the gender bias we talk of. That clap, that laugh, actually shows where the crux of the problem is. So let me give you some numbers. Of the 2.8 lakh scientists, engineers employed in research and development institutions across the country, only 14% are women. If you look at the maths, mine is not as good as Dr. Chakraborty's, but you come to a figure around 39,000 plus, which means the female scientific community in the country is the largest minority. Let us look at some other numbers. Dr. Chakraborty in his opening remarks spoke of women scientists not getting paid well, especially in the areas of STEM. But data available in the public sphere tells us that 81% of women in the STEM field feel that there is a gender bias in performance evaluation. How will you be paid more if those who evaluate your work have a disinclination towards your gender? Where does that disinclination begin? Amongst all the students here and the delegates of the Indian Science Congress, one needs to find out how many women in our country, in our communities, file for patents. How many women in our communities, in our educational institutions are taught how to commercialize their innovations and inventions. That tells you what the pipeline of female scientists and science lovers in the country look like. But where is the leakage? one may ask. So while I was inaugurating the metal magna, one of the first thoughts that came to my mind is that we had a group of young ladies welcoming me and a group of young boys asking me to inaugurate a project that they diligently worked on for 2 months. But when you ask somebody in engineering, how do you imagine or draw a project which has ramifications in terms of a 3D image, many normally say that a girl possibly might not be able to imagine that diagram as effectively as a boy. Now scientifically, if you look at it, apart from cognitive skills, there is something called spatial ability. Now what is spatial ability? I sound like a teacher and Mittal Saab is looking at me कि अच्छा बोल लेंगी तो एक दो इनसे भी lecture करा लूँगा. But what is spatial ability? This is for not only the girls but the boys in the house. Because when we talk about gender parity, it is not the responsibility of women alone. It is equally a responsibility of men who want to give a dignified future for our sisters, our daughters, our mothers. It is for them to also hear. Now, what is spatial ability? Spatial ability is a form of intelligence where a person demonstrates capacity to generate, transform and rotate a visual image. So much so that they can help understand the relationship between real and imagined objects. Now I sound like somebody who must have studied some aspect of engineering, but I'm not. Obviously, everybody knows that. But imagine this. As parents, when we raise a girl or a boy, what are the kind of toys we give our girls and our boys? How many girls in the audience today had their first toy as a doll? How many boys received either small cars, a Lego set or a construction set? And that is where gender bias begins. You imagine that a girl post 12th standard will suddenly have the ability to understand construction, have spatial ability, but not guide her or help her along the way in her journey towards higher education. Now the fulcrum of science is the desire to question and the desire to explore. How many girls in the audience, irrespective of whether you're in the science branch, commerce branch, arts branch, every time you asked why, how, were told, ज़्यादा मत पूछो. How many of you, girls, irrespective of your stream of education, who wanted to go out and explore, let's say the shift of a river, had that conversation in a family atmosphere and were told that this is not a normal girl talk? Those are the changes that we need to bring about. I am glad that the Indian Science Congress today is celebrating the potential of Indian women in science through seminars like this. But it is incumbent upon us as communities, as families, to give, to propagate, to promote the desire to question, the desire to explore, and the desire to love science for the sake of science amongst our children and especially our girls. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the biggest challenges that I find in the scientific community in terms of education is the challenge of language. I was telling Dr. Chakraborty that if you look at data and studies, you will find that English is the lingua franca of science. The global scientific community, the Indian scientific community will tell you that we have studies and research papers and data available in English. And you're told that अंग्रेजी नहीं आती तो सीख लो. Well, easier said than done. If you look at the data which has been put out by the Registrar General and Census Commissioner with regards to the 2011 census, you will find that 96.7% of our country's population resorts to the 22 scheduled languages as their first language or as their mother tongue. तो जिसने जिंदगी भर हिंदी में, पंजाबी में, बंगाली में बात की हो, हम उससे अपेक्षा करते हैं कि जब वो एक हायर एजुकेशनल इंस्टीट्यूशन में आता है तो वो अचानक से साइंस अंग्रेजी में सीख पाएगी, समझ पाएगी. और ये दुविधा सिर्फ लड़कियों की नहीं है, लड़कों की भी है. So my request to the Indian Science Congress is this: can we, through your platform, propagate amongst universities across our country translation of some of the best science journals, translations of new scientific studies, and give it to children not only in higher educational institutions but high schools, so that that love for science, boy or girl, can be embedded at a very early stage. Now, the Prime Minister here was kind enough to address his first visit to LPU